Bom dia, boa tarde a todos. Eu sou Almir, gerente do Escritório da Apex-Brasil. É um prazer falar com vocês desde Moscou. A Apex-Brasil tem seu escritório aqui na capital da Rússia há mais de 10 anos. Nós temos uma parceria antiga com a ABICALÇADOS para promover os calçados brasileiros aqui na Rússia e na região da Eurásia. Já realizamos muitos projetos interessantes juntos. E nós também apoiamos as empresas brasileiras, fornecendo a elas informações sobre os regulamentos do mercado. Este webinar é justamente para apresentar as novas regras de etiquetagem dos calçados exportados para a Rússia. É um tema importante, uma vez que com as novas regras o governo vai combater o contrabando e favorecer as empresas que trabalham de acordo com a lei. Então, as empresas brasileiras elas vão se beneficiar com isso. Eu gostaria, então, de agradecer ao nosso convidado, o senhor Borís Kochergin. Thank you, Borís. Como vocês sabem, o webinar vai ser em inglês, então eu vou passar imediatamente a palavra para a minha colega Irina, que vai comandar o webinar. Muito obrigado a todos.
Thank you, Almir. I'm glad to welcome all the listeners in our webinar today. As it was previously announced, it will be presented in English, and I'm happy to introduce our speaker, a specialist in area of traceability and marking, Borís Kochergin, IT Director of Russian logistic company SmartLines. During the presentation, you can make your questions and leave them below the video in YouTube, and after the program, we'll answer your questions. Well, I wish you good watching. Borís, we can start.
Thank you, Irina. Good afternoon for everyone. Before starting the presentation, I would like to talk a bit how the whole market in Russia began, give you some background. Several companies manufacturing and selling the fur products have asked their government to clean up their industry. Contraband and poor quality of products led to market participants constantly suffering losses. It was impossible to identify counterfeit goods that were sold much cheaper. Honest sellers suffered not only financial losses, but reputational ones too. It was decided to conduct an experiment and introduce product marking. From the government side, the Federal Tax Service was responsible for the project. As a part of the experiment, it was decided to define two types of control of identification signs, for imported goods and for goods produced in Russia. In the first case, control over customs clearance was strengthened. This led to some changes in the customs declaration rules for fur products. In the second case, production control was improved. For example, a company that didn't have production could not take goods out of thin air. As a result, these processes have become more transparent, easier to control. Companies with poor reputations were forced to leave the market or adopt new rules. Summing up the experiment on fur products, the government saw that the tax collection in the industry increased by 8 times, and the market participants received equal and fair conditions. Based on this, the government decided to develop uniform rules for the marking and traceability system. As for the business, together with relevant associations, it began to turn the government with proposals to extend the marking to new groups of goods. Summarizing the talk, the marking and traceability system is being introduced by the government in order to tackle several challenges: increasing tax and duty collection, exclusion of counterfeit and contraband products on the market, equal business conditions for all players, supply chain tracking. Protecting trademarks are also being addressed. It's expected that counterfeit products will gradually disappear from the market, as it will be impossible to import them into the country or even produce. All attempts to obtain or produce the goods illegally will be detected by the marking system. The offenders will then be subject to fines, confiscation, of goods and criminal prosecution. Russia is not the only country that introduces marking of certain groups of goods, whereas the marking and traceability system is already being used in the USA, the European Union, Turkey, Argentina, and Brazil. In most countries, marking is obligatory for medication and tobacco. Currently, only 2 dates are relevant. July 1st, 2020, starting with this date, storage and sale of unmarked goods is prohibited, including retail, wholesale, and cross-border trade. August 1st, 2020, until this date, the goods purchased before July 1st and delivered between July 1st and July 31st can be marked. Therefore, unmarked shoes can be sold, shipped for import or export up until June 30th. The main condition is to mark these shoes in a timely manner before July 31st, 2020. What products need to be marked? Almost all shoes imported into the Russian Federation or produced for sale on the territory of Russia have to be marked. We have a government decree which lists all the groups of goods subject to marking. All shoes must be labeled, except for such shoes as bath shoes and orthopedic shoes. There are 2 more types of shoes that don't have to be marked. Shoes imported as samples for certification or exhibitions. The exhibition samples usually have a hole in the sole, making such shoes unsuitable for sale. Plus, if you follow the rules, exhibition samples have to be exported from the Russian Federation, and the customs authorities should monitor this. And shoes produced in Russia for export are not marked too. The marking code is provided by the operator of the marking and traceability system. Each code is unique and cannot be repeated. You cannot use the same code for all shoes of the same kind, color, or size. The marking code itself consists of GTIN plus serial number plus verification code. GTIN is Global Trade Item Number, provided by GS1 Association. When marking, we can use both the GTIN issued in Russia and the manufacturer's GTIN. The serial number is generated by the marking operator or may be provided by the trade participant, but there are a few conditions. The serial number must be 13 characters long, and it can be repeated no more than once every 5 years. The verification code is a secure part of the marking code, which is used by the operator to determine whether the marking code is authentic or not. In addition to the marking code, there is an identification code. It is important to understand that these are not the same. Identification code is only part of the marking code, consisting of GTIN and serial number. It corresponds to the human-readable part of the marking code. Marking codes can only be received by a resident of Russia. Usually, it's done by the importer or the logistic company. According to the rules, the company declaring the goods is considered its first owner in the Russian Federation, even if the company acts on behalf of another legal entity. The owner of the goods bears all responsibility for the marking codes and for the accuracy of provided information. In our case, we are talking about the importer or the logistic company. It's important to understand that when receiving marking codes for blue women's sneakers in size 36, we must put the marking code on such shoes only, not on the red ones, size 36, and not on the blue ones, but size 37. Only the product that corresponds with this specific marking code. It's very important, since in case of an error detected by regulatory authorities, the importer will be fined for each case of non-compliance, and the goods may be confiscated. As soon as the marking codes have been received from the operator, they can be transferred to the manufacturer or the logistic company. This can be done electronically, for example, as a text file or as a finished label in PDF format. Also, marking codes or labels can be sent in printed form if this way agrees with your technological processes. All marking codes or labels with marking codes must be applied before customs procedures. You can apply the code on the product packaging or on the product label. At the same time, the marking code cannot be printed for each half pair. There must be only one copy and it must refer to exactly one pair of shoes. I repeat, it's very important to understand that all responsibility for labeling falls on the importer or owner of the goods. Customs have the right to carry out spot checks, and the fines for marking violations the fines for marking violations may be higher than the cost of the entire batch of shoes. One of the most common and interesting questions is where and when to mark. Marking must be done before customs clearance. Documents must be submitted to the customs authority with the relevant marking codes already in place. If we have to talk about where to mark, then there are two main options. First, the factory or warehouse of the manufacturer. You, as a manufacturer, receive marking codes or pre-made labels from your buyer or importer in the Russian Federation. In this case, the choice of the technological processes is yours. The main thing is to follow the marking rules, not to mix up the product and provide the buyer with a report on the marking codes that sent with the product. Marking at the factory has several advantages. It's easier to come to an agreement with the buyer on the label format and the data sent. It's easier to identify the goods. You, as a manufacturer, know your goods better. And there is no extra link in the supply chain. However, there is also a disadvantage. You'll need additional resources for marking. If you are already gluing the customer's label on the consignment, then you will not have problem with the marking. You need to agree with the buyer that the marking code will be added to the existing label, and then you apply the label as usual. Otherwise, you might want to consider the second marking option. It involves the 3PL operator. 3PL is a third-party logistic. In fact, it's a contractor that performs a number of operations, including warehouse operations, repacking, marking, sorting, or picking goods, and so on. This contractor takes on work that the factory and the buyer don't want to or cannot do. In addition, contractor services may be less costly than self-marking. This is especially true for groups of goods and for goods that with low customs costs. Another advantage of this option will be additional verification of the good during processing. You can edit customs documents if an error was found in the product or its quantity. At the same time, this option requires an educated choice of contractor. Since the importer to the Russian Federation will be responsible for all errors, all the reputational risk will fall on the manufacturers and the contractor. Let's take our company as an example. I can assure you that the lion's share of all errors happens due to the human factor. We started marking shoes in December 2018 and have already managed to work out most of the problem points. But we still regularly encounter certain nuances and difficulties. This process requires constant attention and control. If you pass the marking on the contractor, you need to make sure that this will not lead to significant delays in delivery. Okay, you're ready to mark the shoes on your own. How do you get the marking code then? You can get pre-made labels in the form of PDF. The label can already contain all necessary information, including the marking code in the form of data matrix. Or it can only be the marking code, which is not very convenient since it won't be possible to visually determine which product it refers to. We provide our customers with pre-made set of labels for each shoebox and label for the master box. As you can see on this slide, there is a label for the master box on the left and set of labels for individual packaging with shoes on the right. In our case, we highlight the box number in the bottom right corner of each label to minimize marking errors. According to all customers' requirements, this information can be edited or changed. Another option for receiving data is in text form. As you can see on the slide, data, including marking codes, can be provided in a text file. The marking code is converted from the letter digital sequence into a data matrix, which is then used on the label. This option is especially convenient when the production is well automated and the label is applied automatically, or when there is an internal technological process that allows you to work with such form of data. Pay attention to GS symbols. When working with data, it's very important to not lose GS characters. They are used as data groups separators. When checking the marking code at customs or during the sale, an error may occur if GS characters have been removed from the marking code. The bottom line of the slide shows what IC stands for, identification code. This is exactly the part of the marking code by which the product is identified. Everything else is there to verify the marking code itself, to make sure that the code has not been tampered with. It's very important to understand that the marking code can be applied to one pair of shoes only. You cannot print 10 identical marking codes and apply them to 10 identical pairs of shoes. This will be considered a violation and will lead to a fine. It's also important to understand that if you are marking products with the same article but of different colors and sizes, these are completely different products and they have completely different GTINs assigned to them. When you are placing the marking codes on, you mustn't mix up colors and sizes of the shoes. Otherwise, it will be also considered a violation. International GTIN can be used for marking the products in Russia. In this case, the importer can use the manufacturer's GTIN and add more information to it when necessary. Or you can get a GTIN from the Russian branch of GS1, the organization responsible for issuing the GTIN. If the manufacturer only uses the internal GTIN starting with the number 2, then the importer will have to get the GTIN on their own and describe the product in detail. This is neither good nor bad, it's just part of the marking process. In any case, a barcode on the packaging with shoes simplifies the processing of marking a lot. It gets much easier to identify the product if you don't label the shoes yourself and use contractor services instead. As manufacturers, you shouldn't be afraid of the high costs of software development. You can integrate your software with the software of your customers in Russia, especially if there is not many of them. In fact, the whole process will be reduced to exchanging data and sending reports. Gradually, both commercial and free marking projects appear on the market. Most of them take work around the specifics of Russian companies, but some developers are ready to adapt their software. For smaller batches of shoes, you can perform all processing without using software in general. As I already mentioned, you can receive pre-made labels in PDF format, print them and stick to shoes. As for the equipment, it's even more simple. You can just use existing thermal transfer printers. If you don't use them, then a simple laser or inkjet printer and printouts on self-adhesive paper will also do. For your convenience, it's better to use 2D scanners or data collection terminals, at least to check the products before shipping and make sure that there are no errors and repeating marking codes. This brings me to the end of my presentation. I'll be happy to answer all of your questions. And if you have questions later or need some advice on marking certification, custom clearance, and delivery of shoes to Russia, you can always contact me or APEX-Brasil.
Ира, звук.
Som, Irina, por favor. Conecte o som.
Thank you, Boris, for this interesting presentation. We really have some questions that we had received the last week, and I will read the first question of Rogério. Leather Act in Brazil prohibits the use of the word leather in non-animal materials, including suffixes and prefixes for the word itself. And in Russia, are there rules for marking products of various compositions, including the correct description of leather, as well as the prohibition of terms that mislead the consumer?
No, there is no such restriction. There are products made from genuine leather or composition leather. Products from these types of leather belong to different groups of goods. During customs clearance and certification, you provide documents about the product and its origin, but there is no restriction on the use of the term leather. When marking, we always indicate the material of the sole, top, and lining. In the future, the buyer or the regulatory will be able to verify this information.
Thank you for the answer, Boris. And we have 4 questions from Juliana. I will start from the first. The sequence of operations in the conveyor production is complex. Each pair of shoes should answer to a rigid set of quality criteria. One could almost say each pair is given as hash that is stored in blocks of the same show model. Is there if there is a marking error of the label with the shoe code, we will need to stop the entire conveyor to prevent systematic faults. Is there a way to make the quality control process simpler?
To answer this question, I need to understand your technological process better. I'm ready to help you if you can contact me and describe the task in detail. You might be able to solve the problem with the help of additional verification and machine vision.
Well, the next question from Juliana. What information is inputted in the Russian data matrix system to generate the codes?
This is a question of obtaining a GTIN, because this is preciously the description of the goods, which is what the marking code request is based on. At the moment, 14 parameters are used to describe one product, including the brand, country of origin, color, size, materials of the top, soles, and lining of the shoes. Normally, all the necessary information is already contained in the specification for the product that you send to your buyer in Russia.
Thank you, Boris. The third question from Juliana. Is there any specific information that is needed to request codes? Is it possible to request a package of codes and leave them ready for the future use after releasing a new collection? Since the process is slow, it would be possible to prepare some of the labels before we even have orders, to enable us to roll forward with production in a timely manner.
This question partially overlaps with the previous one. In the product description, we must name the importer that brings the product to the Russian Federation. Yes, you can order a package of coats, but you should be responsible for choosing a partner with whom you will deliver the goods to the Russian Federation. If you order all marking codes through one importer and the buyer in Russia wants to arrange the delivery through another importer, then the marking codes will have to be reissued. In fact, I would not call the process of obtaining marking codes slow. If you are ready to quickly exchange data and you have got the product description for the entire collection, then marking codes can be obtained within a few hours. The finished labels in PDF format can be sent to the factory within 1 or 2 business days. We have already adjusted to the process and we can help you with this.
Thank you, Boris. And the last question, that is not really a question, it's a suggestion. Juliana say, I suggest give examples of other sectors that already have marking experience, such as food sector, cosmetics, and others, to see how marking works there.
In fact, sure marking in Russia began back in October 2019, when some companies managed to completely change their business processes to work with marking. The closest example of finished process of marking and traceability of goods is the accounting of alcohol products. A record is kept for each bottle. Importers, wholesalers, and retailers have already learned to work in these conditions. It doesn't cause any problems anymore.
Thank you. And we have 2 questions. Will the marking affect the cost of products and delivery time?
It shouldn't impact the timing and cost of delivery much. It's important to choose the right partner who you and your customers will work with. For example, marking 5,000 pairs of shoes in our warehouse takes 1 business day. The next day, the entire batch is ready for shipment. This is when uploading, repacking, and warehouse operations are starting. The cost of marking 1 pair depends on several factors, but even in the most difficult conditions, it doesn't cost more than €1. Usually it's significantly lower than this.
Thank you. And the last question. How can we as manufacturers set up a process of marking from our part?
It's very important to establish the process of information exchange with the importer or the buyer. A lot depends on your business processes and on the technological processes used. There is no universal solution, but we can always find it together.
Thank you, Boris, for this interesting presentation, for sharing your knowledge, your experience with our listeners. Thank you, dear listeners, for staying with us. The team of APEX-Brasil hopes that you will never have difficulties with marking in future. And if you have some questions in future, you can always contact Boris. He left his contacts, his email. Thanks for watching. And the team of APEX-Brasil wish you a good day. We were happy to see you with us. Stay with us, APEX-Brasil and ABICALÇADOS, and we will see you in other webinars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.